Hi booktube, it's me, Sadie, and I'm here with slightly disheveled hair to give you my October wrap-up. I'm currently filming on October 30th. Probably won't go up till the 31st, but either way, I know there is no way I'm going to finish another book. I've already started into my nonfiction November book, which I've actually been reading for quite some time. It got curtailed for a bit, picking it back up, and there's no way I'm going to finish it in the next 2 days. Not with how busy we are. So, I am going to go over my October reads. I read 5 books in October, and I have one holdover from September that was kind of a September-October that I'm going to do too. And that's not really bad for me. And you'll see why. So the first book I finished was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I think this is his only novel. I'm not 100% sure. It has an introduction by Irvine Welsh, of course, of Trainspotting fame. I love the vintage red spine editions. They're so pretty. They're so pretty. I'm a sucker for pretty and uniform spines. I'm one of those people. So I went into this knowing that it's considered a gothic or a more horror-driven book, and the first 2/3 of the book I was like, this is great, this is a good Victorian novel. I'm not sure if it qualifies as Victorian, but this is a good novel of its period. I'm enjoying it, but where's this gothic influence? Where is this whole thing going? And then the last third of the book, I was like, whoo bippy, what just happened there? Why is this going? Whoa, okay, I get it now. And so my overall findings of this book, I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And really, I mean, how could you not? It is a very slim book. I was wondering what it could do in that, but I have found with September and my under 200 challenge and just going forth, that anything that was written in the Victorian or the pre-Victorian, like anything around that time frame, or even in the 1700s, they could write a short book and it would be good. But current books suck if they're too short, if they're novels. So this one holds true to the Victorians know how to write short books, because it's only, it's 194 pages, which is why I put it at the end of September. But it's worked great for an October read. It had a spooky element. Of course, we're following, we eventually follow Dorian, but we start off following one of his friends, and we watch him just descend into the weirdest madness ever. And I'm not going to give away the plot, even though everybody probably knows it by now. There's a picture. There's a picture. There's a painting involved. And it's just so good. If you haven't read it and you like classics, or if you haven't read it and you like gothic, read it. It's really good. Really good. Shockingly really good. Then I finished book 9 of the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, which is Winter's Heart. Basically I started this in September because I started it when I was traveling, and I finished it in October. So there's 14 books. So I have 5 more to go. I was thinking about trying to finish this by the end of the year, but I just think that's unacceptable and unrealistic for me. So I am going to try and finish it by the end of next year. I'm still going to try and read a book a month, which means I would be done 10 and 11, possibly, by the end of the year, and then I would only have the 3 to go. My original goal for this year was to read 3, and I'm on the 4th. I finished 4. Lord of Chaos, Crown of Swords, Path of Daggers is 3. This is 4. I finished 4 this year, so I am really defeating my challenge for myself. They're massive. This is 780 pages. 780 pages. This is. This is like the epicest of fantasies. And Finally, stuff is starting to happen. Let me see, how can I discuss this book a little bit without giving you any spoilers? Depending on which character you like, it was either way too much of one character or not enough of others. It starts off with two of my favorite characters in the book, and we get to see a lot of them, and I was like, yay! And then it drops off out of nowhere, and we're following my least favorite character, and you follow him through a good portion of the book. However, that's my husband's favorite character, so he thinks that this is where it starts to get good. It is starting to pick up. It was a slog. Book 7, I think, and book 8 were kind of sloggy for me. 6, 7, 8, sloggy. This one, we're starting to get into the culmination of what's going to be happening. So, yeah. Wheel of Time, Robert Jordan, book 9, Winter's Heart. And the next book I have to read is Crossroads of Twilight. And I do a mixture of listening to it on audio, because we have the audiobook set on my husband's Audible account, and so we basically share an account. Mostly because he listens and I don't. I will listen to like a book or two, and I have to do it at like double the speed, and it's still very uncomfortable for me. But it's great for if I'm out of it and I need to sleep. It helps me get to sleep, basically. So I will do that with the Wheel of Time books, and then I'll just pick up reading where I left off. I try to keep do a chapter at a time. Then I read possibly the most let down of my month, maybe my year. The Death of Bunny Monroe by Nick Cave. I love Nick Cave. I love all of Nick Cave's work. All of his poetry, all of his music, and The Ass That Saw the Angel. His previous book, And the Ass Saw the Angel, and The Ass That Saw the Angel. Do you have it listed? And The Ass Saw the Angel. Yes, that was his previous book. That book is amazing. This book is not. This book is 300 pages of guys talking, a single man talking about vaginas for the most part. No, it's 278 pages. So Bunny Monroe is a man who sells beauty products door to door, and his wife is very troubled, and as you can read from the flap, so I'm not giving anything away, she commits suicide basically in the first, second, or third chapter. Very early on she commits suicide, and he is left with his son, who he doesn't really give a crap about, and he has to figure out what to do, and he tries to pawn his son off on his in-laws, and they don't want his son, so he is subjected to having Bunny Jr. join him on a road trip. Meanwhile, there's a serial killer on the loose, and he basically proceeds to have sex with every woman he tries to sell beauty cream to. And when he's not having sex, he's thinking about vaginas, particularly Avril Lavigne's vagina and Kylie Minogue's vagina. They make big appearances in here. But every third page is talk of a vagina. I own a vagina. I don't think of them this much. I asked my husband, is this normal? And he said, no, this is excessive. And I was like, Nick Cave, you let me down. And of course, on the back, we've got quotes from Irvine Welsh, Will Self, Neil LaBute, Rob Sheffield from Rolling Stone. I don't get it. I didn't get it. I didn't like it. It was horrible. I gave it 2 stars. I had to finish it just to say I finished it, and now it's getting the hell out of my house because I am just so not impressed. What the hell, Nick? What the hell? However, if you want to read about vaginas for 200 pages, be my guest. Then I needed something that I knew would probably work. So I picked up The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton, which has been a YouTube darling or booktube darling since it came out. And it was good. It took me about 3 days, which I was shocked because there's 400 pages, and it's not big font. It's not big font at all. And so we follow our dear Nella as she gets married off to a man who lives in Amsterdam. He buys her miniature house, or doll's house, whatever you want to call it. And subsequently, she employs a miniaturist to make things for the house. Originally, it's like a lute and like a, what else does she have made? Originally, there's a lute involved and a few other items for the house, and she gets sent these dolls, and then there's a bunch of intrigue. Now, if you're like me, the intrigue was very, very obvious. Right from the get-go, you're like, oh yeah, I see that happening there. However, in spite of the fact that the intrigue is exceptionally, you can read it ahead of time. Like, it's foreshadowed enough that you're like, there's no way it's not this. It is extremely well written. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. Her research for the area was good. I'm not an expert in 1686 Amsterdam, but I think she was really well researched and she uses things properly. It was a good book. It was a good, will I read it again? No. Would I recommend it to people? Yes. I would definitely recommend this to certain people. At the end of the day, I would read more by her. I'm not sure if this is her debut novel or not, but is this her debut? Does she have more? I don't see more listed. Usually they list, right? So, yeah, no. Good book. Enticing read. Everything you want to read after you've read way too much crap. Then, another book that's been making its rounds on booktube because there was recently a read-along was The 13th Tale, which I figured would be good, by Diane Setterfield. Diane Setterfield. Which I thought would be good because I've heard it's a bit gothic. It's a bit of a throwback book, historical fiction-y, and I figured good for October. Because I wanted to read spooky crap, but I couldn't bring myself to read spooky crap. That's what pregnancy does to you. And so I started it, and I was like, okay, this is getting good. This is about Margaret Lee, whose name I forgot. I just had to look it up on the back, and I just finished this like less than a week ago. But Margaret isn't really discussed in terms of her name anyway. She's a narrator for the most part of the book. She lives in an antiquarian book store where her father sells rare and antique books. And subsequently, she has written a couple of amateur biographies, shall we say, of people who have long since passed. And Vida Winter, who is quite the recluse and quite the prolific writer, has decided that she needs her biography done and that Margaret is going to do it. And Vida Winter, of course, has spent her entire life creating myth and mystery around her, never telling the same story twice about her life. So Margaret sets out to do this and to meet with Vida and to start, and they start, and calamity and hijinks ensue. Don't read this right after The Miniaturist. You know why? Because they have very similar, hold on a sec. They have very similar plot twists. Similar plot twists, which gets you really unimpressed with life. When you're halfway through and you can see everything happening and you're like, I don't get it. I don't get why this is so popular. You know why it's so popular? Because people who love The Miniaturist gave themselves a year and then read this. That's why this is popular. Or they didn't read The Miniaturist. They read this first and then they read The Miniaturist. And either way, no matter how you slice it, they don't back-to-back them. And maybe that's why I was so hard on it. There's supposedly a ghost. It's not a ghost. There's twins. There's lots of twins. And quite frankly, the use of the twins was a bit much. Okay? It would be a spoiler for me to say, but the Margaret attachment to the Vida character, because of twins, is just too much. Coincidence. There's no way. That kind of irritated me. It rubbed me the wrong way. It was a good book. I read it fairly quickly, and if I'm going to judge based on if I was completely engaged in the book, I was. I kind of cared about things, but it just irritated me, and I think it's because, again, the plot was so similar. And sometimes I can't back-to-back books, which is why I haven't finished The Wheel of Time, because I need to give myself time between the books, or I feel like it's too repetitive or it's too much. Usually I can do trilogies, and that's about it, and then I have to stop. Like, Lord of the Rings is fine because I consider it one book, but other things, like if it's more than a trilogy, I really need to take breaks. And even if it is a trilogy, there are times where I need to take breaks. And I jump genres a lot because of this very problem, which is, of these two, which one's the better one? I think it depends on which order you read them in, or if you give them enough space. I didn't give them enough space. But if you like one, you'll like the other. I can guarantee you that. It was well written. I see why it's so popular. It's... Moving on. The last book I finished, which I finished last night, and it took me 3 days, even though it's this big. This big, guys. 189 pages, this big. Took me 3 days to read this. You know why? Because it's really friggin' heavy. And that is Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. Tanya Tagaq, of course, is a Inuit, and I got a schmutz. I schmutzed it. Fell off my bed, and it got schmutzed. I don't even know on what. Tanya Tagaq is an Inuit artist, throat singer, woman in Canada. This is her first collected work of fiction. I'll call it a collected work because I've tried to explain this to my husband, and it's like song lyrics and poetry interspersed with flash fiction and short stories and myth, and it's all kind of jumbled. Now, I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I wanted to give it 4, and I might change that later on the line depending on how much I get stuck on it, but I think it's a great first work, and I think if you're used to reading this particular kind of work, it will be less jarring. It's a giant trigger warning. It should just be called I Am a Trigger, because there's so much abuse going on in here. We've got sexual abuse, physical abuse, like yeah, no, it's horrifying, and it's discussed in such a flippant way that it makes it even more unsettling. However, I think that's what she was aiming to do with that. There are a group of stories right at the end that all tie together, which I really enjoyed. I think that could have just been, in and of itself, a little novella. There's also pictures. She also draws pictures in here. So it's so hard to discuss because you've got, and it all takes place in and around Nunavut's area, I assume, because it's all discussed from the land of the rising sun, you know, the 6 months of light, the 6 months of dark. People are learning to speak Inuit, or Inuktitut. Inuktitut. It's been a while since I had to say that. And there's talk of residential schools in the aftermath of those. There's a lot of alcohol abuse going on. There's a lot of drug abuse going on. Everything you imagine you would see in a northern community, or at least I would imagine I would see in a northern community. It's very disturbing. It's nonchalantly thrown out there, which makes it very blatant and very, like, it's almost like I ate dinner, I huffed glue, you know, and the way in which it is discussed is very disturbing. Just disturbing. It disturbs. And again, very triggering. But if you enjoy flash fiction, short fiction, poetry, and experiencing a different culture, then it's a book for you. I look forward to seeing what she does down the road. It shows that she has a really good base. as a debut, it inspires me to think of what she can do further down the lines, if that makes any sense. And I can see why Canada went mental about it. Like, it's probably still on everybody's top reading list. It blew up in Canada as soon as it got released. I picked it up when it was released. So, there you have it. Those are the books I finished in October. I am doing nonfiction November, but I am not doing a TBR for that because I just plan to read them from oldest to newest. That's right, I'm going to start with my oldest nonfictions and work my way to the newer ones. Hopefully that works. If not, I'll jump around, but that's my plan for right now. And I'm sorry this is so long, but I always do long videos because that's who I am and I prefer them anyway. I will see everybody again next month. Bye.